has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch Michael by there.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Folks, since this arrest of Rex Heuremann on Thursday, this case has sort of captured the whole nation in regards to the fears that were brought about by an arrest like this, or actually relieved the fears of a lot of people that were wondering when this Gilgo Beach case would be closed. And there's so many other aspects to it in regards to the investigation. The investigation is not over because there was an arrest. This investigation is still so active and still so important that they follow every lead. They, as you know, the state police, the Suffolk County Police, the FBI, they're conducting searches in the Massapequa home on Long Island, Massapequa Park, Long Island, of Rex Heuermann. Some of the things they are finding are unsettling. Some of the things that they are looking for, you may ask, what are they looking for? And we've spoken about many things, anything that can connect Rex Heuermann to the victims in this case, anything that could potentially connect the victims to Rex Heuermann. What do I mean by that? Potentially articles of clothing, a purse, a pocketbook, a wallet, a picture identification. These are commonly taken by serial killers of this type as what we refer to as a trophy. Forensic evidence. Is it possible that forensic evidence is still existing in this house more than 10 years after these events? Is it still possible? Yes, the answer is yes, it is possible. It has been revealed that a search of the downstairs of the house, of Rex Heuermann's house, revealed a locked closet. Inside that locked closet was over 200 firearms. 200. This was out of the mouth of Suffolk County Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison. Over 200 firearms. What does that tell us about Rex Heuermann? Does it tell us anything? Also was a life-size doll. What does that tell us about him? You know, do not forget they are not finished searching this house. And as you notice, the investigators, the searchers, the detectives, the FBI agents, they're wearing white Tyvek suits to protect their bodies and also to protect the evidence. Amazing that in a case like this, evidence that was recovered 10 years ago was preserved and resulted, and I'm referring to the hair follicles found on 3 of the bodies, was reserved and identified as Rex Heuermann's wife's DNA. A hair follicle was preserved for over 10 years, and it was identified as belonging to Rex Heuermann. That is outstanding police work, both in the processing and also in the protection of this evidence for so many years, that it obviously was stored properly so that they could identify this evidence once the technology existed. The technology raced by the investigation to the point where the technology is so good that it not only caught up to the investigation, but surpassed it. How many times can you actually say something like that? Are there things wrong with this investigation? In every investigation, police, FBI, we all make mistakes. However, this was an outstanding investigation. And as soon as Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison in 2002 put this task force together, I think that was the catalyst to really bringing this case together and winding up where we are on this Thursday, making an arrest of Rex Heuremann. Today, I have a really, really exciting guest. And what else could I bring on but an attorney, a former NYPD police officer, a writer, a radio talk show host, actually a songwriter also, a dad, and an attorney. Let's welcome to the show, Montgomery Delaney. Monty, welcome to the show.
Hey, Bill, good to see you. Happy to be here.
You know, Monty, we had spoken about how transparent, maybe too transparent, they were with this investigation in letting the public and letting know would-be defense attorneys, would-be other criminals out in the street, potentially an accomplice. We don't know. I'm not saying he had an accomplice, but potentially there could be one. And I believe that a lot of information was released by the Suffolk County District Attorney. Would you like to comment upon that?
Well, I tell you, I watched the press conference and I was absolutely dumbfounded by the amount of information that the district attorney put out there in the public realm. And basically, he just assured the public that this man was guilty. I think he polluted the jury pool. I think his defense attorneys have to be looking at a motion to change venue. It's just it was beyond my comprehension that he could come out and make statements like that. And then Chief Harrison did the same thing, call the man a demon walking amongst us. I thought that was just way above the pale. I mean, there's been no trial yet. We have to pick a jury. We have to convict this man using the evidence that we've garnered. And I just thought that was just way beyond the pale. They gave out way too much information. And District Attorney Sweeney said, well, we're not going to see him in one prior conversation. He said, we're not going to see me out there with a magnifying glass on Gilgo Beach, in other words, to say, look, I'm not going to puff this case up. And then they make this arrest and he just goes out there and goes way beyond the pale in terms of not only basically saying that this man is guilty to millions of people, but also divulging a lot of the investigative procedures, which I don't think is a good idea to share with the public. Certainly not with the criminal public. Absolutely not. So it was frustrating to sit there and watch him and listen to him. It was I think he spoke for 25 minutes and he just gave way too much away, and he basically painted this man as guilty, and there hasn't even been a trial yet. He may very well be guilty. It looks like there's a lot of compelling circumstantial evidence here, and the DNA evidence is very compelling, but he's not convicted yet. And I just think that was just, if I'm a defense lawyer, I'm saying, okay, this jury pool is polluted.
Absolutely. And you raised the point. And I, a lot of people push back in the chat. We get people that comment on our podcast, which is great.
Right.
I love to read their comments, and I love, some of them are right, and sometimes I can be wrong. But I also cringe when law enforcement gives away investigative secrets. And I don't believe that law enforcement needs to be transparent with the public as per how they caught this guy.
I agree with you 100%.
Right. The transparency is the job of the district attorney's office through discovery, not through the media.
What's ironic is that one of the things the district attorney said was that they knew that this guy was monitoring their activities on the internet. And in fact, his Google history demonstrates that. I think he made over 200 searches into what was going on with the investigation. Now, to give away all of these investigative techniques and speak of them with such specificity, I mean, any killer out there was privy to a wealth of information about investigative procedures and techniques. I don't think that's a good idea. It's not a good idea at all, because this guy is not. There's more than one serial killer out there. There's more than one murderer out there. There's more than one criminal out there, and I just don't think it's a good idea. I agree with you 100%.
A lot of times you'll hear people talk about something called the CSI effect. And what the CSI effect is, I know you know what it is, but the CSI effect is basically all of these TV shows doing shows about crime and about the capabilities they have that the police can't even do what they're doing on TV.
Right.
But the public believes they can because it must be true. They're doing it on TV. And
Yeah.
it's not true. It's like they have this easy button. It's like when you see on TV all these cameras that
Well,
zoom
it's
in
always
on the
been like
lights.
that. You remember Perry Mason used to like go to that point in the show where he would testify in front of the jury and tell the jury, like the guy would just be on the stand. Okay, you're right, Mr. Mason. I admit it. I have to disabuse jurors of those notions all the time when I'm picking a jury. These ideas they have from television and from the media about the legal system and what happens there are quite often misconstrued as a result of their love for these television shows. You and I, we're cops. I look at these police shows. Some of them are like comedies to me because that's not what police work is. I see that you have me here on the screen as P.O. Delaney 23809. I have been referred to as that in a long time, but I think it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I do too. I like that you put that you never forgot that you were a cop, and also for Marines out there, Monty's also a Marine, and as we know, once you're a United States Marine, you're never a former Marine. You're a Marine. You earned that title. You're a Marine. So I just wanted to mention that also, and thank you for your service. I want to play a little bit of this. We'll see what this district attorney was saying on Fox 5.
Mm-hmm. Against the man suspected of the Giggle Beach killings.
Yeah, that man, Rex Heuermann, a Long Island architect, has been charged with murder in the deaths of 3 of the 11 victims and a long unsolved string of killings. Prosecutors say, Heuermann had burner phones and a long internet history containing at least 200 searches about the investigation into the Gilgo murders.
And joining us now, Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney with details about this special task force and investigation that led to the arrest of Heuermann. I mean, this has been over a decade in the making. One of the top investigators saying this guy was a demon. And it just sticks with you, but also, very congrats on your team and hats off to you guys because this is a long time coming.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me. Yeah, I got into office January of 2022. We formed the task force. We had our first meeting in February 1st of 2022, and then by March 14th of 2022, after reviewing all the evidence in the case, we had honed in on this defendant.
When you're talking about an avalanche of evidence, what does that look like? And I know there's also maybe a fourth person that he's been linked to. Why are we not there yet with a fourth person?
Well, we utilize the grand jury because the grand jury gives you 2 advantages. You have the ability to subpoena record.
Monty, I want you to comment upon what is an avalanche of evidence.
Well, I think they were referring to the vehicle when they said that. I think that was like a tongue-in-cheek reference to the vehicle. But it seems as though, from what I've been reading, what I've been seeing, it's a fascinating case, number one. But it seems as though the investigators, they did a very good job of, gathering some very powerful circumstantial evidence against this man. Also, the DNA evidence is really very powerful. I mean, it amazes me. We were cops 40 years ago when if you got a fingerprint, that was considered like, high tech. Now today, what they're doing with the DNA science is absolutely amazing. Not only identifying people from their own DNA, they're identifying people from the DNA of their family members and their friends and their cousins. And you got sites like 23andMe, which will tell you if they got a piece of hair and they submit it to 23andMe, that 23andMe will tell you who the cousins of these, who the possible relatives of this individual hair is. It's amazing to me. So very tough to get away with crimes today, especially when you think about transference. Like it's so easy to transfer a hair or some epithelial cells or, from one body or one person to another. And I think one of the things they're probably looking for in that house, are, hair samples, very important and things like that. Potential, as you said, trophies, pieces of jewelry, articles of clothing, identification cards seem to be very popular with serial killers. They want to take those as trophies. So I think that the investigation is going to be ongoing. I think they're going to uncover more circumstantial evidence, maybe some more very powerful evidence. And I also think that eventually, if they follow this to its conclusion, that they're going to find other bodies connected to they may find other bodies connected to this individual or to other individuals. I mean, but the notion that if it is him, and I'm not saying it is, but it looks like they have put together a relatively strong indication that it might be him. But if it is him, I doubt that these 3 or 4 ladies were the only ones. That's just not the nature of this beast.
Monty, I think you're right, because if these murders took place in 2010, he's 59 years old right now, right?
Mm.
So that was 13 years ago. So he was 46 years old.
Right.
Dr. Joni Johnson on my show the other night says most serial killers do not start out at 46 years old.
Yeah.
What she wants to know, what we all want to know, what was he doing in the years prior to being 46 years old, before these killings started? What was he doing? That's why I've said also that they have to track everywhere this guy went.
Right.
Probably almost since he was in high school. Track where he traveled to.
Mm.
His wife is from Iceland. I would be already over in Iceland talking to the Iceland police. What kind of cases do you have here?
Right.
How many times did he travel to Iceland? How many times did he travel to other states?
Mm.
He's an architect. Did he travel on business?
Well, they're going to try to connect the dots. I mean, every jurisdiction that he's ever traveled to now is going to be looking at open cases and cold cases to see if there's any connection, now that they have his DNA. That's interesting. Other thing interesting here is it seems like he stopped for a number of years, which we've seen that before. We saw that with the bind, torture, and kill killer, and one of those serial killers in California. I think it was a Green River killer, where they stopped for a period of time because the scrutiny was very, very intense. So they stopped, and then they go back to it later on. But here's a guy, like you said, in his 40s, in mid 40s. That's the full flower of your manhood. You're big, strong, agile, tough at that age. Powerful, and I think the indication is that he, for years he researched the what was going on in this investigation. So I think he was probably, if it was him, and that was the reason why he was searching, he was worried about getting caught.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let me go back to the Suffolk DA.
Call witnesses, but also you have secrecy. So we were, utilizing the grand jury. We were working through the case, and then towards last Thursday, we had given the potential danger and also potential disclosure of our investigation.
When you say potential danger, what does that mean?
Well, the defendant lived a very atypical life. He bifurcated his life, and he was still continuing to use burner phones, still continuing to communicate with sex workers.
Wow.
So that was obviously very concerning. Obviously, we had him under surveillance, but still. So, early evening Thursday, the decision was made. We need to put him in custody.
To move in.
Monty, could you imagine at what point, we want to know, when did they actually have probable cause? When the case could have been taken down? They have probable cause at such and such a date, and they don't tell anybody, and someone gets killed by him. In the
I think we could look back at the the search warrants that they garnered, because you have to show probable cause to a judge in order to get the search warrant. So if they were looking to do searches, months ago, they probably had what they considered to be probable cause back then. And what was very strange is there's a couple stories that come out in the last couple of days. One of a young lady that was in a networking group with him, and another young lady that was had some kind of encounter with him in a park near his home. So he was still chatting up young women right up until his arrest. These were incidents that happened recently, and these two young women came out and said, that they felt that he was creepy, and I think one woman quit the networking group because she felt uncomfortable with him, and the other woman was compelled to call her sister to come escort her home from the park because he was basically following her around the park. So, he may have been stalking, these two women. He may have been still engaged in that kind of behavior. God only knows. God only knows. I mean, The DA must feel very, very strongly about his case for him to just come out and basically just say this guy's guilty. And I hope his case is as strong as he says, because, once you say that, once you do that to the jury pool, now, this is going to be a protracted legal battle, I think. And I don't know if he's going to try to put together a team of attorneys, but whoever's working on this case has got their work cut out for them, because there's motions that have to be made right now. It's going to be a fascinating thing. I think ultimately what will happen is if it is him, he'll plea. They'll make some kind of deal with him to cop to the other bodies and find other bodies, and he'll plea.
Well, that would really help in this investigation, because then, if he's going to do life without parole, no matter what, it would really help the police and the investigators to know what other cases did you do.
You see, I don't believe, I'm not a big death penalty fan, but this is a case here where the death penalty would actually be beneficial to the prosecution if you could hold that over his head. Right now, there's nothing really to hold over his head.
But we don't have it in New York.
I know we don't have it anymore, but it's because in a state where they had the death penalty, they could hold that over the defendant's head. But here, he's looking at life in prison without parole anyway, so he's got nothing to lose, by keeping his mouth shut.
Absolutely.
And what was the smoking gun in this case?
I think the smoking gun is first of all forming the task force and bringing in really great analysts and investigators from a number of agencies and putting them directly in contact with our prosecutors.
But what was that piece that said, this is our guy?
Well, first of all, looking at everything, and then on March 14th, that's when the name Rex Heuremann first came as a suspect, and that was as a result of one of the state police investigators realized that he owned this Chevy Avalanche, which was the vehicle driven by a man that last saw the last victim, Amber Costello, alive, and that individual was described very distinctly, very large man, very heavily built, glasses, white, thick hair, thick dark hair, and when we saw that Heuermann matched that description. But not only that, earlier in the investigation in 2012, the FBI had established these areas of interest in Massapequa Park, as well as Midtown Manhattan, as far as cell phone usage in areas where these cell phones were being used. And Heuermann, he lived in Massapequa Park and he worked in Midtown Manhattan within that same area. So these were very compelling factors. And then, of course, now you go back to the crime scene and you've got these 5 question hairs, which were unsuitable for regular DNA, but we did mitochondrial DNA.
That brings me to my next question. Talk about the advancement of technology. I mean, we're talking a decade ago these murders took place.
Sure. So
Monty, I just also want to say, while we're on this topic, that Chevy Avalanche,
right,
was 13 years ago.
But he still owned the car. But he still owned the car. He was, the car was seen.
No, I think they found someone else owned it, and they got the car. Someone down south, I think, owned it.
Yeah.
But the point is that many
kept
people
it for years, parked in front of his house. I mean, he didn't make any attempt to get rid of the car.
But many people will say, why didn't they have that lead years ago? And it wasn't just that lead; it was connecting that lead with other evidence that enabled them to identify Rex Heuermann.
Well, they knew about the make and model of the car years ago, but I think to make any connection with him, I mean, I don't know how many of those cars were sold in the metropolitan area. I don't know how many people they had. They must have done a run on the car and probably came up with thousands of people owning them. And it was, I don't know what kind of work they did with that aspect of the investigation years ago, but. It seems to me that the guy kept the car for a long period of time, parked it in front of his house. Everybody knew that he had a car like that. But for them to put it together at this point, look, I'm just glad that they finally put it together. But I do think that this DA is going on every talk show. It was on News Radio 88 today. I was in the car listening to him. He's polluting the jury pool with every show that he goes on. I had several cases in my career that were newspaper worthy, like profile cases, and I always said to the reporters outside the courthouse, I don't try my cases in the news. I try them in the courtroom. And I just don't think this is a good idea for any attorney to, whether you're on the prosecution or the defense side, to go out there and just give the whole theory of your case out to the public, and basically to dictate that the individual that you're prosecuting is guilty per se, without even the benefit of one day of trial testimony. I think that's a bad move. I don't think it's he should stop going on TV shows right now. Too much.
Yeah, I agree. And Monty, I don't know if you saw this, but it was the 32-page bail application.
No, I hadn't seen that. I know you mentioned it on the podcast. I'm interested. I would like to see that myself.
Well, it basically gives the whole case of what led them to Rex Heuermann, all the evidence they have, step by step. And I mean, it seems oversimplified. Let's say a 13-year investigation boiled down to 32 pages. And of course, we know it's not that simple.
Yeah, well, we used to say less is more, right? We used to say less is more.
Well, I can imagine in reality, there's probably about 50 case folders of 50 pages each. So figure that out. And it all boiled down to 32 pages. But there was a lot of.
Well, the thing is this, if you're a defense attorney, you're going to get discovery in the case, right? So you're going to get everything. Hopefully, through Brady, you're going to get everything that they have. And you're going to get to look at it. Now, think about this. If the defense attorney's got all of this discovery, they would not be out in the media revealing all of the evidence that has been gathered against their client. This guy, he's trying the case in the media, and that's not the place to try the case. It's just not.
No, I agree with you, and I think that because of where we came from, the NYPD, and even more so the FBI.
And I want to give him credit. I mean, he put this task force together. I mean, the investigators did a great job. It seems, but enough is enough with the TV shows and the interviews. Enough is enough, because at some point, the I pronoun becomes your enemy. You might want to run for something later on, but this is not the way to do it.
No, and I just wanted to say that the FBI has a policy of not talking about ongoing investigations, period. Yeah. So when people say, oh, you cops, you this, you that, you guys, that's your attitude. No, this is the way it's done. You keep it close to the vest, and that will protect your case. Right. Going out to the media and telling them how you caught this guy, when you got the evidence, who you got the evidence from, how much evidence you have, that does not help your case. It hurts your case.
Right. And also now you're going to have reporters sticking microphones in the face of every witness in the case, of every family member. And who knows how that's going to taint testimony going forward. It's just not a good idea. It's just really, I think it's detrimental to the voir dire process, the picking of a jury. And I think if his lawyers have to be salivating at the possibility of getting the venue changed from this county out. You might try this case up in Watertown someplace. And at some point, I don't care how far away you go, if you pollute the pool enough, you can't get a fair trial anywhere. Because everybody's going to have a preconceived notion. This guy right now, we're like a week and a half in it, and the media has portrayed him as the killer. So it's going to be very tough in terms of jury selection. And I just don't know why he keeps going on these shows. Enough. Okay, we formed a task force. We developed evidence. We have arrested this man. There's a true bill, and we're going to have a trial. And that's it. The rest is all puffery. And, I don't know if it's egoism or a false sense of pride. I mean, you should be proud. You did a good job. You put the people together that could solve the case. But at some point, less is more, and you're just damaging. You're damaging. And again, nobody really. If he's this, what this guy is alleged to have done is so heinous and so disgusting that nobody's going to really feel sorry for him. But Under the Constitution, he has a right to have a jury that's not tainted.
Absolutely.
And that's what's happening here. And I don't think it's good. It's not good for the system.
Absolutely. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed to us, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and ring that bell. And if you want to support us financially, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels, and we also have a YouTube channel membership with, count them, 5 different levels. And you see the folks in the green font. They're part of our YouTube channel memberships, and we really appreciate all of our friends, our subs, and our supporters of Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. You know, Monty, I want to just finish playing a little bit more of this district attorney, and then we'll move on from this because there's a lot of more aspects of this case that I want to talk about.
The 4 women were murdered between 2007 and 2009. September of 2009 was the last murder. They weren't discovered till September of 2010. They weren't discovered until late 2010, and in that harsh environment, there wasn't a lot of evidence except for these hairs, which originally were not suitable for nuclear DNA testing, but regarding advancements, we were able to do mitochondrial DNA. We did DNA profiles. We got an abandonment sample from the defendant and some of his family members, and the profile from those samples matched some of the hairs found on the bodies, specifically hairs from Heuermann and 2 hairs from his wife.
We'll talk about the victims because this has affected many families, especially in our area, outside of our area. When you had the chance to call them and tell them this news, what was that like?
Well, we actually, we did it in person.
Okay.
Because, it's just a powerful thing. And that's a moment I don't think, any of us will ever forget, because they had waited for so long. And, periodically you do meet up with them. And of course, we didn't tell them why we were coming to see them. And so when we saw them and they knew, just to see the emotion and the relief wash over them, it was very gratifying, because that's really why we do what we do.
What's next? I mean, we still have 6 bodies.
Yeah, so we have
7 technically, because he's only been charged with 3.
Yeah, he's been charged with 3, and those 3 are part of the Gilgo 4. What has been called the Gilgo 4. The 4th victim, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, the grand jury investigation is continuing, and once we acquire more evidence and are able to present that to the grand jury, we feel good about that 4th case as well.
Ray, but could there be more? Because you're saying, and what's shocking to me is that this guy was still using his burner phone, within just a week ago of trying to contact sex workers. So could there be more?
So, as I said, we started February 1st, March 14th. We centered on this individual. We have these 4 cases in our sights. We're going to complete that, and then we're going to keep on going. And it doesn't matter what I think, it matters what I can prove, and we're going to continue to work through this case. And we have a great team, and we feel good about things.
What's your...
So Monty, I mean, that's the first time he really referred to, I'll try this in the courtroom type philosophy, which is what he should be saying all the time.
What I can prove.
I think that.
But then again, what I can prove, again, it's the I pronoun.
Yeah, what I can prove.
He switches to the we pronoun a lot, but in the end, it comes back to the I pronoun, which I think is telling. But go ahead.
I think that the Maureen Brainerd Barnes, that completes the 4 of what they say is the Gilgo. They're referring to now as the Gilgo 4. And after all, she was on. Here, we'll put it up on the screen.
Yeah.
This is what's considered to be the Gilgo 4. Maureen Brainerd Barnes, who disappeared in July 2007, Melissa Bartolome, Amberlynn Costello, and Megan Waterman. Now, for whatever reason, they didn't charge the case, and you heard he still has grand jury action in the case of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. Perhaps they did not have enough to pull the trigger on her case yet.
Right.
But they were afraid to leave him out there. So they had to go with what they had for the other 3, which is fine.
Well, I think if he was still contacting sex workers and he was chatting up these the one lady from in the park riding the bicycle, she made a police report about him stalking her in the park. So I guess they felt like maybe he was the fever was rising in him and he might be ready to do it again. So they made a decision. And one thing we talked before about what they were finding in the house. Interesting that I understand that these 4 bodies were found wrapped up in a sort of a camouflaged burlap material that is commonly used in duck blinds. And I wonder if they found any of that material in the house. That would be an extremely huge piece of evidence if they found some of that material in the house. That would be very, very strong, you know.
You know, Monty, exactly, because we spoke with Dr. Joni Johnson the other night as to modus operandi and signature. And of course, modus operandi, as you know, as a cop and as an attorney, is the method of operation, how the person that commits the crime, how they're comfortable. And lots of times, defendants, they're comfortable with an MO, with a modus operandi, and that's how they commit their crime. Signature is another thing, and what you're referring to with the camouflage burlap, that is a signature, that he used them to tie up the victims. And in essence, that somehow also caused his downfall, because the hairs that were found on this burlap, and one piece of hair I think may have been found on tape, was identified years later as DNA technology became so sophisticated that it was able to identify mitochondrial DNA from 2010.
Right. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, we're solving cases now that are 25, 30 years old. You know, we're all over the country where police officers kept samples of, you know, rape kits and stuff like that, and fingernail clippings, things like that. And the DNA technology is solving a lot of cold cases all over the country. So it's really fascinating that we've come this far forensically in terms of being able to conduct these types of scientific investigations into crimes that are old and lying fallow, and able to solve them and get some of these people off of the streets, you know.
And, you know, Monty, that's why it's so, not to get political, but that's why it's so important to fund the police. This is part of funding the police. And that's one of the reasons it's so good to bring the FBI in on early, because the FBI is like the kid with the great basketball. You want him to come and play because you love his basketball.
They have all the advanced toys, you know.
Yeah, they have all the best equipment, and they have a budget that is better than any police department's budget. Right. And it's almost, you know, a bottomless pit of money they could throw at the case. And I know I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not that much. And that's why
I will say this about the idea of defunding the police. You know, this is a progressive idea. It's very unfortunate, because when that idea takes hold and that happens, the people that get hurt are the people that live in poor communities. You know, you don't need the police in Scarsdale. You need them in the South Bronx. You know, you don't need the police in Massapequa. You know, you need them in.
We just showed that we
Chicago. You know, so defunding the police really hurts people that live in poor communities more than anybody else.
That's 100% correct.
And it's the people that live in those communities that elect these people that want to defund the police. So it's a kind of an irony there. So, you know, you get what you vote for. You know, it's true. So.
Well,
that's all. Don't get me started on that.
No, we're not going to get political here, but just you know, it is so important to fund the police, especially for things like this. We had another case across the country from last year. Eliza Fletcher, a young mother who was out for a jog in Memphis, Tennessee, ran by the University of Memphis, was kidnapped off the street by a rapist, and who she fought for her life. And he wound up shooting her in the back of the head. Right. They were able to solve that case in like 18 hours. They had this perp based on DNA. I was like, that's unbelievable.
Well, because now when you're arrested for anything, you know, a lot of my clients have had DNA samples taken from them in the courthouse for like minor crimes, you know. And it's a good idea. So we have a database now. We didn't have it, you know, a long time ago. Now we have a huge database getting bigger every day. Anytime somebody's arrested, they get swabbed, and you know, that's kept in a database. That's a good thing. You know, years ago, I don't know, you're an old flatfoot, so you might remember when if you had a fingerprint, you had to go through one card at a time to like see if you could get a match on the fingerprint, right? And then we got the nicer system where you could do it, you know, electronically by the computer. That was that was a big boon to police technology. And so it's gone so far in the last 20 years in terms of forensic methods and means of gathering evidence. With luminol, with the chemicals used to find blood type, with the chemicals used to find toxins in the blood, the chemicals used to identify blood, or bring it out of floorboards and cracks in the wall, and DNA. I mean, I don't know where it's going to go in the next 20 years, but I think if you're a criminal and you're thinking of committing a crime, you need to think twice, because it's getting harder and harder and harder to get away with crimes because of this.
100%.
Yeah.
The science, the technology is amazing. The other thing is that from an
the other part of this too, this is a cautionary tale for young women out there who might be thinking about getting involved in the oldest profession in America. I mean, if you're a young woman and you're thinking about getting involved in that, just remember that there's a lot of people that are mentally ill out there that are basically stalking the internet and Craigslist and places like that for victims. He's not the only. If this guy is the guy, he's not the only guy. There's dozens of these people operating all over the country at any one given time. We know that for a fact.
Absolutely. A lot of people, what they in the interview with the DA that we just listened to with DA Tierney, they asked, are these the only 4, or how about the other 7, or did he kill before? And my answer to that, and I think your answer to that, I would find it very surprising if he hasn't killed before.
If it is him, I think
right. If it is him, and it's not just the 3 they've so far connected.
Well,
and the 4th, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, they're waiting to indict on that case also. But I would find it very hard to believe that this is it, that he's never done this before. And we said if he did these cases, that he was 46 years old, that he started. And Dr. Joni Johnson said, no, there's no way. He just started at the age of 46. He's done this before the age of 46.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. If it is him, I mean, you're going to find before and after there'll be cases. And again, police officers in every jurisdiction that he ever traveled to should be looking at their cold cases now and trying to, compare DNA with what we have here on file now. And that may be a way to link him to other cases. So we'll see. More is going to be revealed. There's no doubt about it. It's a fascinating case, kudos to the investigators for putting it all together. And I would just caution District Attorney Tierney that okay, enough is enough on the press conferences. Try the case in the courtroom. Don't pollute the pool any further than it's already been polluted.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
After the case, what I was going to do was I was going to work with my task force. We were going to form a task force. We were going to work with the Suffolk County Police Department. We were going to work with the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office. We were going to work with the New York State Police. We were going to work with our FBI, and we were going to form this task force, and we were going to work together, and we were going to use the grand jury, the power of the grand jury, to reach a determination in this case. Because the grand jury has 2 things. It has power, it has reach. You could obtain documents, you could interview witnesses. But the other thing that the grand jury has secrecy.
Yeah.
No one knows what you do when you operate a grand jury proceeding. And we knew that when we were investigating this case and when we dealt with the media or whatever it was we were doing, we were playing before a party of one, because we knew the person responsible for these murders would be looking at us. So,
Monty, that says it all. It's so interesting, right?
That starts out with I.
No, but I'm not even talking about him. The perpetrator, though, is following what the police are doing in this case.
100%.
And evidence of that was there was over 200 searches on his computer that he was searching. What is the Gilgo Beach Task Force doing with cell phones? What are they doing with the? So it's very clear as to why you keep things close to the vest. And I try to explain it all the time, and we get not from everybody. Most people understand it, but some give pushback. Oh, the government's too powerful. Oh, the police. Oh, the district attorney's office. How do they didn't violate his rights? All these different things. But there is the public does not automatically get transparency in an investigation.
You can see serial killers all over the country throwing away their burner phones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get rid of the burner phone, you know. Yeah, I mean, it's just too much. It's too much to be revealed in this kind of setting in the press conference. And I thought, after the press conference, I thought, okay, he got out of the system. He's done. And now I see him on every possible media outlet in the last couple of days. It's not good. This is no good. I can't believe nobody's saying to him, you know, tone it down. Get off the TV.
I would imagine that someone is saying something to him.
I hope so.
And I would hope. I want to play a little bit of Rodney.
I mean, if he
Harrison.
really wants to try the case in his jurisdiction, he should clam up, because he's making it. He's creating the possibility that the case doesn't get tried in his jurisdiction. You know, that's what's going to happen here.
Let's put Rodney Harrison on the screen, who's a little bit different than the DA Tierney. He's a very Rodney Harrison. Of course, we know he came from the NYPD. He was the chief of detectives. He was the chief of the department. But one of the things I'm so impressed with about Rodney Harrison, he's such a humble guy.
Yeah.
He is superbly humble, and he's the first person to give someone else credit.
He was very well loved. He was very well loved by the men on the job. There's no doubt about it. People have good opinions of Chief Harrison. And also on the, I want to congratulate Commissioner Caban, first Hispanic commissioner of the New York City Police Department, who's named today, and I wish him well. But go ahead.
100%. But you know, Rodney Harrison says everything about him during the riots, the riots over the last 2020 to 2022. He was seen out on the street. He was the chief of detectives tackling a burglar and cuffing him up. That is, when other cops see that, they're going, "Did you see the chief of detectives?"
Well, you know what other chief of department was like that? The guy I worked for in the 4-4 precinct, John Scanlon. He was a guy who would he'd get out of the car and he'd cuff somebody up. He was a cop's cop, you know, man's man. And,
but Monty, that is what the rank and file love to see, and that's Rodney Harrison. And I can't. Let me play a little bit of this interview with PIX today.
It's always something when you're holding three on a stairwell, and the first guy up the stairs at 3:00 in the morning is the inspector. You know, that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Surveillance video that was released of this arrest. We see the suspect walking down Fifth Avenue. Take us that moment, Commissioner, and why it was
Increase the volume,
moment that you decided.
Yeah, I can't. It was
so there were some concerns. The case was in the grand jury. We had to wait for the indictment for it, but we were concerned about some leaks and it getting out. And if it gets out and it gets to his attention, now it makes the investigation a whole lot more difficult. So after confirming with my partner Ray Tierney and discussing that this is something that we should move in right away, we chose to catch him at work and wait for him to come out and grab him right away.
You got him right near his job in Midtown Manhattan. I think it was near 35th Street, not far from Penn Station. You know, I want to ask you about starting the task force. That made a really big difference. You came to the Suffolk Police Commissioner's office the end of 2021. You held a press conference almost immediately. What difference did that task force make?
It made a lot, but the one thing I do want to share is it's not about me creating a task force. I want to kind of get away from that.
Amazing, right? Right away. He's the guy. It was his idea. He brought the idea from the NYPD, and right away he's not taking credit for it. He's saying it's not the task force. It was. He doesn't like to use I and me. He doesn't.
About the men and the women that were part of the task force, and the great work that he did under Detective Lieutenant Kevin Byra. When I first got into the position of being police commissioner, I wanted to make sure that this was the right guy for the spot. And I brought him into the office, and me being a former chief of department and running ComStat meetings, I asked a lot of questions. You know, are we looking at jail calls? Are we debriefing prisoners? Are we looking at a host of other things that could possibly lead us in the right direction? And a 3-hour meeting, the man did not look at a piece of paper.
Right. So he knew it in his head.
He knew,
I got to get specific about one thing, the Chevy Avalanche. That made the difference here. And your team re-interviewed a witness from early in the case. And that second interview made all the difference. What details did he give you? I think he even gave you a description of the suspect.
Yeah, so one of the investigators that were assigned to the task force from the state police, Tiffany Atai, she was really somebody that kind of moved the needle in the investigation. And
she knocked the wall down.
Yeah, and pretty much knocked the wall down. well said. But we were able to now track this green avalanche to that little box in Massapequa Park. We re-interviewed the individual who kind of gave us a better description of Rex Heuremann, and saying pretty much he had bushy hair, these big glasses, and was the size of an ogre.
Yeah,
and that really helped us get this case going in the right direction.
Just such a humble man,
Yeah.
a great man. Just doesn't want to take credit for something that he obviously was the one that came to Suffolk County, started this task force.
Yeah.
Again, that's not important in retrospect.
No, because
It never is important.
cops just want to catch bad guys. That's all they want. The reward is, for me, the reward always was when a judge banged the gavel on a guy and sent him to prison. And I knew I got some bad guy off the street. That's all you're concerned about. And again, he was very well loved by the men that worked for him, and we wish him luck out there on the island. Was sorry to lose him. Another guy who probably should have been commissioner. I know Chief Scanlon probably should have been the commissioner. I mean, they made Carrick commissioner instead of him, which was a mistake. And this is another guy that would have made a great police commissioner in New York City.
Well, one of the things, Monty, that folks maybe don't understand is that these positions are political appointments, and for the Suffolk County police job, they made the right pick.
Yeah, they did. They picked a really good man. Really good man.
He's not just a great cop, but he's a great person, humble person, and that's the most important thing. And again, you mentioned Caban on the NYPD. He came up through the ranks. He's a good guy. I'm sure he's going to do very well on the NYPD. I just want to get back to the case a bit here. When we think about the recovery of these remains and how it's 13 years ago,
right.
And when you look at this looks like a picture based on how these guys are dressed, the picture of Gilgo Beach
right.
in the wintertime, how cold and unfriendly that was. And this is where these bodies were recovered from. And the decomposition, because they've got to remember, they were recovered 10 years after they were put there.
Yeah, and that salt environment is devastating to anything. I mean, I have a house down in Carolina, and the ocean is relentless. The salt air just rots everything. It rusts everything. I mean, I've got to replace my air conditioner every 3 years. It's amazing. I think by wrapping the bodies up in that material, probably preserved them somewhat. And protected them from the elements somewhat. Miscalculation by the killer. Better to just dig a hole and cover them with lime.
Well, it's this guy. Of course, we know that he's a psycho. He's motivated by psychos. He's a psychosexual sadist.
Yeah,
and we know that's his motivation.
Yeah.
And according to Dr. Joni Johnson, that is the very most dangerous type of serial killer.
Sure, that's Ted Bundy. That's Bundy. Yeah.
And no conscience, but they also get pleasure in inflicting pain on others.
Oh, that's Bundy. That's Gacy. Bundy decapitated a couple of his victims. Gacy, God knows what he put those young men through before he buried them in his basement. This is these people certainly do fit a type, and one of the interesting things here was I looked at the profile that was done in like 2011. I think might have been by the FBI. It was really, really accurate in terms of who this guy might be back then. I mean, they had some idea back then. I don't know who did the profile. I don't know if it was an FBI profiler or Suffolk County profiler, but the contents of it were very accurate. It was quite impressive.
But Monty, they use certain things like almost I think it's 90%, 95% of the time, a serial killer is a male white.
Right.
So right away, we can all use mathematics and say, okay, it's a male white.
Most of the time, it is a male white.
And an organized serial killer, which this obviously had to be, because why? Because he had to travel. What does that mean? He had to own a car.
Right.
He had to be familiar with the area. He had to have a certain level of intelligence. So I could predict a lot of those things.
I think, familiarity with the area was a big thing, because if you've ever driven down that road that goes from Jones Beach over to Long Beach and Point Lookout, to bury something there in the wintertime, if you wanted to pull up 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning there's no traffic whatsoever. And you could be out there digging a hole for hours and nobody would see you. Because, I mean, it's just nobody's there at night. It's a perfect place to dump a body. It's and it's not only somebody who lived in the area would know how perfect that was.
Yeah, Brooklyn Pasola. I don't mean every single serial killer is a male white. We found that out wasn't true in the Beltway Sniper.
Right.
They made a horrific.
And then the guy, I forget the guy's name, the guy in Cleveland who killed 15, 16 women before they caught him. It was a black man.
Yeah, I'm saying it's not.
They're out there.
Statistically, it's most of the time it's going to be a male white. I'm not saying it's always Wayne Williams in Atlanta years ago that killed all those children.
Yeah, occasionally you have an alien, a woman, occasionally, and occasionally you have male blacks. But for the most part, most of our most famous serial killers have been male whites.
Isn't that crazy that you just used the word famous in describing a serial
infamous
killer?
I should have used the word infamous.
Infamous, yes. Yeah. And look, let's play a little of this guy here.
Rex Heuremann. I'm an architect. I'm an architectural consultant. I'm a troubleshooter. Born and raised on Long Island.
Officials claim Heuermann is responsible for at least 3 murders that plagued the Long Island community starting back in 2010. Since then, 11 sets of remains have been recovered in the secluded Gilgo Beach area of Suffolk County, New York.
Right.
These young women went missing between July of 2007 and September of 2010. They were found in December of 2010 by the Suffolk County Police Department, and then there was nothing, absolutely nothing. For the next 13 years, their cases went unsolved until today.
In early 2022, officials say a new Gilgo Beach task force comprised of Suffolk County Police Department, the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office, New York State Police, and the FBI was established. Just weeks later, investigators narrowed in on Heuermann as the prime suspect.
We took analysts, we took detective investigators, and they worked on a daily basis with other talented investigators from all of the agencies here. We started that in February 1st, 2022. 6 weeks later, on March 14th, 2022, the name Rex Heuermann was first mentioned as a suspect in the Gilgo case.
For more than a year, investigators kept watch on Heuermann, during which time they used more than 300 subpoenas, search warrants, and other legal processes to collect evidence in the case. Throughout it all, officials believe Heuermann was closely monitoring the Gilgo Beach investigation. Between March 2022 and just last month, Heuermann made more than 200 internet searches related to the Gilgo Beach investigation, looking up, quote, why could law enforcement not trace the calls made by the Long Island serial killer? And why hasn't the Long Island serial killer been caught? On top of that, court documents show Heuermann's home IP address followed the Suffolk County Police Department's Gilgo News website for updates on the investigation. That's why officials opted for grand jury proceedings in his case.
The grand jury has two things. It has power, it has reach. You can obtain documents, you could interview witnesses. The other thing that the grand jury has secrecy. No one knows what you do when you operate a grand jury proceeding. And we knew that when we were investigating this case and when we dealt with the media or whatever it was we were doing, we were playing before a party of one.
To contact victims in the case, investigators used Heuermann's American Express records to show he was in the same location as multiple.
One of the things that shows that he was a sadistic psychosexual killer is that he used two of the victims' cell phones to call and taunt their family.
Right. Reliving, as a way to relive the crime,
Yeah. And that,
I think that evidence is very powerful. That evidence is very powerful.
100%.
But again, I don't know how they're going to, they need to, that's got to be put together somehow. I mean, do the people recognize his voice? Are they just doing it based upon the cell phone? Did they find the cell phone? that's not. I'd be interested to know how they put that piece of evidence together. You know, when I was talking about before about the other serial killers, black males, the guy in Cleveland was the guy named Anthony Soule. And then you had the very famous guy out in California, Sammy Little, who killed about 90 women. They estimate 90 women. And he was doing that for 40 years before he got caught. So, they're out there, but most of them are white males. I think it's a pretty common feeling about, serial killers.
Absolutely.
Of the burner phones when they were used to contact victims. Court documents read in part, quote, significantly, investigators could find no instance where Heuermann was in a separate location from those other cell phones when such a communication event occurred.
We also went back and looked at his cell site records, and we compared his personal cell site records with that of the 4 target phones, and we saw that there were areas of commonality. In other words,
so they have an incoming call coming into one of the victims, okay, and they're able to identify the area, not the exact location, the area where the phone came from, the cell phone tower where that transmitted the phone call, and then they're able to say, well, he was in that area on that day at that time. That's pretty strong.
Absolutely. I want to do a quick commercial, Monty. Folks, if you're looking for a great attorney in the New York metropolitan area, then Joe Murray is your man. Joe's a retired NYPD police officer who also happens to be a fantastic defense attorney. You can reach Joe on his cell phone at 718-514-3855. Email him at joe@jmurray-law.com or go on his website, jmurray-law.com. Joe Murray's not only a fantastic defense attorney, but also a huge supporter of the Police Off the Cuff podcast. We really appreciate his support. Monty, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. I think that, sometimes when people hear our perspective as former police officers, retired police officers, somehow they think, oh, you guys are tainted, you're this, you're that. But I also like to bring you on because you're also an attorney, and you can see it from that perspective and how people couldn't understand why we criticized District Attorney Tierney for all of this, basically pouring the case out in public. And I'm glad that you were able to explain it from a perspective of an attorney.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was my lovely wife who just walked out of the office. Look, this is a fascinating case. A lot more is going to be revealed. Pleasure to be on with you again and to see you. I'm looking forward to seeing how this develops. I mean, this is going to be a very, very interesting case and a very interesting prosecution. But what I'm really thinking is that, this guy might take a plea and deprive us all of a trial. Now with the damage to the voir dire, to the jury pool, I mean, his lawyers are in a better position to seek a plea, because if the DA keeps going on these news shows like this, I don't know where you're going to find an impartial juror in the metropolitan area. I just don't know where you're going to do it. This case is receiving incredible media attention, as it should. I mean, it's an incredible case. So, absolutely. But we always have to keep the Constitution before anything else. It's got to come first,
Absolutely. Look, we say it even though in the the public perception he's already guilty, but he is innocent until proven guilty. Right. He has that presumption as an American citizen. Folks,
that's how it works. Whether you like the guy or not, that's how it works.
Absolutely. Folks, I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. This is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Myself, Bill Cannon, and retired NYPD police officer, attorney, songwriter, author, radio talk show host, and dad. Oh, and Marine Montgomery.
4-4 forever. And you could join me on WVX 1460 AM on the second and fourth Wednesday of every month at 10 a.m. Give us a call, chime in.
Have a great day, Monty.
Thank you, Bill. Be safe. God bless.
One episode just ain't enough.